Hey everyone, and welcome. Let's talk Bitcoin. The market has been on an absolute roller coaster lately, and it's left a lot of people scratching their heads, wondering what in the world is next. So, in today's explainer, we're going to break it all down, from the global economic pressures to the nitty-gritty of the market's internal health, and we'll even look at what could signal a real turnaround.
So, what's really driving these wild price swings? That feeling of uncertainty that's just hanging in the air? We've seen these massive drops, then these little partial recoveries. But that underlying weakness, it just seems to be sticking around. So, let's get to the bottom of what's really going on here.
All right, let's dive right in. And to start, we've got to look at the big picture. Right now, there are some pretty significant external forces, macro level stuff, that are putting a ton of pressure on Bitcoin and the entire crypto market. Okay, so this timeline, which comes from an analysis by Matrixport, really shows a perfect storm brewing. It all kicked off with some chatter, speculation that the Bank of Japan might finally raise interest rates. Now that triggered a big unwind of what are called carry trades. That's just a fancy way of saying investors who borrowed cheap money to buy riskier assets suddenly had to sell. And they sold things like Bitcoin, which pushed the price down over 6%. That sharp drop then created a domino effect, leading to almost $1 billion in leveraged positions getting wiped out. Ouch. That just poured fuel on the fire before things finally found a shaky floor. And if you want to see what the big money is doing, look no further. A staggering $3.5 billion flowed out of Bitcoin ETFs just last month. I mean, think about that. Since ETFs are one of the main ways institutions get into Bitcoin, this kind of massive outflow is a huge red flag that institutional demand, which was a major engine for the last rally, has seriously cooled off. So with all of these investors getting skittish about Bitcoin, you have to ask, where is all that money going? Well, it seems like a classic safe haven is making a big comeback. We're talking about gold. And this slide really tells the story, doesn't it? It's a tale of two assets. On one side, you've got Bitcoin ETFs just bleeding cash. And on the other, gold ETFs are seeing a major resurgence with fresh money flowing in. You can literally see capital rotating out of the new digital asset and into the old school precious metal. And it's not just us noticing this. This quote from a macro strategist over at Bloomberg really hits the nail on the head. In this shaky, uncertain environment, the market is voting with its dollars. And right now, gold is definitely winning the battle to be the go-to alternative to regular currencies. But here's the real kicker. This isn't just your traditional Wall Street investors. We're seeing huge players from inside the crypto world hedging with gold. Take Tether, the company behind the biggest stablecoin. They've been quietly stacking up a massive gold reserve. We're talking 116 tons. To put that in perspective, that's about as much gold as entire countries like Mexico or South Africa hold. That tells you a lot about where even the crypto insiders see stability right now. So we've covered the external pressures, but what's going on inside the Bitcoin market itself? Well, a brand new report from Coinbase gives us a really deep dive under the hood. And honestly, what they found is pretty revealing. The big headline from the Coinbase report is this feeling of deep caution. See, in past dips, you'd always see a rush of buyers eager to buy the dip. But this time, Coinbase is pointing out a real lack of capital ready to jump in. And that suggests investors are either really hesitant or maybe they just don't have the cash to deploy. And this slide really breaks down the technical damage step by step. First, that super important long-term trend line, the 200-day moving average, broken. Then, the price dropped below the average price that recent buyers paid, which means a lot of new investors are now underwater. And finally, that huge psychological and technical support level between $98,000 and $100,000, it just crumbled. The results of all that? There's just not much natural buying support left at these levels. Now, when you zoom out and look at performance, the picture gets even clearer. Compared to US stocks, Bitcoin's performance since October has been, well, terrible, especially when you adjust for risk. In fact, Coinbase says this is one of its worst periods of underperformance ever, putting it in the same category as some major historical market crashes. So all of this, it culminates in what analysts are now calling a demand shock. What does that mean? Well, basically, the people who you could normally count on to be buying, they haven't just disappeared, they've actually flipped and started selling. You've got long-term holders finally taking profits, and as we already saw, those ETFs are seeing record amounts of money flowing out. Okay, I know. That was a lot of bearish news. But is it all doom and gloom? Or is there a potential path forward for a recovery? maybe even as soon as this December. Let's take a look.
The first thing the experts over at Coinbase are stressing is caution. This is not the time to be a hero and aggressively buy every dip. It's what they call catching a falling knife, and you usually get hurt. The smarter play, they argue, is patience. Be selective.
So if we're being patient, what exactly should we be watching for? Well, this table lays out the roadmap pretty clearly. The key signals that things might be turning around would be, number one, a big return of trading volume. Number two, we need to see those capital flows flip back to positive for ETFs and stablecoins. And number three, we might need a big macro catalyst, something like, say, an interest rate cut from the US Federal Reserve. And that really brings us to the final critical question, doesn't it? With so much weakness inside the market itself, it really feels like Bitcoin needs a spark from the outside world. So could the Federal Reserve's big decision on interest rates coming up on December 10th be that positive catalyst everyone's waiting for? The entire market is definitely holding its breath.
If you found this video helpful, be sure to smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss your next daily edge. More news in our Telegram channel in the first comment section. See you next time.